So welcome everybody to another Meet Success session. We have quite a few people coming in now. We've got over 60 people registered, so hopefully they'll be coming through in the next couple of minutes. What we'll do in the meantime, I'm going to introduce you to Rifqi later on, but at the moment we've just got a few housekeeping things to do to make sure that you're clear about how to participate in the webinar. Amjad is saying, hi Terry, how are you? He's sent me the questions already. That's great. I've got them here, Amjad. Look at that. See? I printed them out and I'm going to ask Rifqi some of those questions later. And for the rest of you, you'll be able to ask questions during this session. Now, before we get into the conversation, I'll introduce Rifqi in a moment. Before we get into the conversation, I just want to show you how to post a question if you're not familiar. You'll see on your screen at the moment, you have the control panel, and down the box down the bottom, you have type question here. You just click there, send, when you've typed your question in, and I will see your questions come up. So I might choose to ask them to Rifqi as we're going through, or I might leave them a bit until later. The session will run for about 50 minutes with 10 minutes at the end for questions, but please post your questions as we go. Because it's nice to tie them into what the conversation is about. Now, the control panel is quite large. If you want to reduce it to this smaller panel on the right-hand side, simply click on the arrow inside the orange icon, and that will reduce it so that you have more of the presentation to see. Then when you want to post a question, you just click on the arrow again, and it will expand to the full control panel. Okay, we might go through and ask a few questions while we are waiting. So, questions of you, that is. So let's have a look. I'm going to ask you the first question, that is, where are you? So if you could tell me, please, whether you are in Melbourne, regional Victoria, interstate, or overseas. I'll give you a bit of time to vote there. So just click on one of those, and as that comes up, we've got 50% have registered their vote. I'll just wait until it gets close to 100, and then I'll share that with everybody. This helps me and Rifqi know where you're located, which is interesting. 80%, 85, 88. We're going up. Okay, a couple of seconds and I'll close that one off and I'll share it with everybody. Okay, let's finish the vote on that one. I'll close and I'll share. And we can see most people are in Melbourne, which is where we're located. I'm at the OBP Australia office and Rifqi's at home. We've got 18% overseas. That's great. So welcome to everybody who's tuning in from abroad, and nearly 30% interstate. Okay. The next question I'm going to ask is, what is your profession? So I've lumped administration in with accounting and finance and banking there. I know they're very, very different, but if you could just give me an indication, that will help us maybe direct the conversation a bit. Just wait a few more seconds for people to cast their vote. We're up to 80%. Just pick one of those 5 and I will close it in a couple of seconds. Okay, let's close that one off and I'll share the results with you. And we've got more than half are IT people. Okay, interesting. And then the next highest is engineering. We've got 11 others. That's quite a bit. And only 5% in the accounting, finance, and banking, and 5 in sciences. Okay, let's the last question before we get into the conversation, and that is, are you in Australia looking for professional work? In Australia working in your profession already? Or are you overseas planning to come? I think I know what the response is going to be with this one, but we'll just wait until everybody's voted. 85%, a couple more. I'll close that one off now and share the results with you. And as I thought, 3/4 of you are looking for work in your profession, which is why you're here, of course. Okay, let's hide that one and let's get back into the conversation. So, Rifqi, welcome. How are you going?
Thank you, Terry. Good. How are you?
I'm well. So thank you for joining us from your home.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate you giving your time, and hopefully there'll be lots of good questions for you, and you can share your experience with all those who are viewing from abroad and locally as well. So first of all, just to kick off, when did you come to Australia, Rifqi?
So I came to Australia last year in 2016 in January.
Okay, all right. And what did you know about Australia before you came?
My cousin, I had a family here before I came to Australia,
Yeah.
and I was sort of like searching in regards to study before I came to Australia. So that was the reason why.
Okay, so you initially came as a student, is that right?
Yeah, that is right.
Yeah, okay, all right. And why Australia as your destination?
I was actually by accident choosing Australia because, yeah, at that
So
time I was applying for.
you meant to apply for America and you wrote Australia instead, is that right?
No, I applied actually at 3 universities, one in the UK, one in Australia, and the other one is in Singapore. And I got the first response was from ANU, and I was waiting for another couple of weeks, so I didn't hear any more news or whatsoever. And I decided just to go with the ANU.
Okay, so you were studying at ANU initially. That's great.
Yeah.
So you lived in Canberra, of course, then initially. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. So before you came to Australia, did you do any research on how to find a job?
Initially at that time, because I was a student, I couldn't quite spend my time looking on particular jobs because I was concerned about my study at that time more. And after that, after I graduated and I came back, and then last year when I decided to actually come to Australia for good, then I decided to do lots of research in terms of finding a job and how can I transfer my skills and everything to Australian workforce.
Okay, so looking at what you were thinking of before you started looking for work, how did that idea of how to find a job compare with the reality of actually seeking a job in Australia? What was different from what you thought it would be like?
It was actually a 360 degrees experience, I have to say, because it was exactly the opposite than as what I was thinking before I came to Australia. Because I've never had any gap through my employment in my entire life ever since I was born up to if I finished my uni and then I started to work. I've never had any gap, like not being able to work for a certain period of time. And I was just thinking, because I was studying in Canberra and I had a degree from ANU, and I thought it was going to be easier if it's not really easy for me to get a job as soon as I arrived in Australia, but that wasn't the case. And I was actually really surprised knowing that even though that you've been working in, your country or whatever that you might be at that time, it wasn't actually quite, translated into the Australian workforce as you were thinking at that time. That's my exact experience. And I was actually surprised that was the case.
Yeah, okay, so this is a very common thing that people experience. It's a lot harder than what people expect.
A lot harder.
Yeah, okay, all right. Can you remember how let's say the second time you came back when you came to find a job, were you optimistic? How did you feel when we first arrived looking for work in Australia?
I was thinking like at the maximum like couple of months, then I could get work. That's it. Simple as that. Because the work that I did at that time when I was in Indonesia, it wasn't easy as well because I was doing risk management and finance consultant business with the Indonesian government, also with the private companies as well. And I was just thinking 2 months maximum, that would get a job just like that. But after a few months, I was just sick was my best friend at that time. I'm sure lots of people here, really, really sick on their bookmark in the computer, just like what I did at that time. Spend lots of time applying for jobs. Yeah, it was actually quite an amazing experience, I have to say, and it was really an eye-opening experience also.
So I'm suspecting that initially you didn't get many or any positive responses to your applications?
No, and to be honest with you, not even a single phone call for an interview.
Okay. Interesting. Yep.
Yeah.
So you said your expectations were 2 months and you'd find a job. How long did it actually take you to find work?
So the first interview that I got, it was about 3 months and a half after I kept applying for jobs. And it was from one of the biggest universities here in Melbourne. And I didn't get that job, but I got shortlisted up to the second stage at that time. And one thing that I really, really took an advantage from the interview, even though I didn't get that job, which is I asked them what was the reason I didn't get that job. And at first, they didn't even letting me know what was the reason why, but I approached one of the panelists who interviewed me, and I sort of like, please be honest to me, what was the reason I couldn't get the job? Just like that.
Yep.
Okay. And she just simply said to me that because I didn't have the proper or sufficient local experience of working here in Australia, and especially here in Melbourne. As simple as that. And then when I asked them again, if I couldn't have that local experience, okay, how can I get a job? Like, it's sort of like which one comes first, whether a chicken or an egg. So it's like you can't even really describe it how you're gonna get experience if you don't get a job.
Yeah.
So yeah, but that's one of the main reasons. So yeah.
Sure. So this is an interesting response after an interview. This happens occasionally. I mean, they've invited you for an interview knowing that you don't have local experience, and then they use that as a reason for not giving you the job. It's a little bit unusual why they would waste an hour of their time if that's going to be a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
because they knew exactly when they're looking at my resume, everything is there. Like all my overseas experience, it's there. You can't make that up. And everything that I did at that time, it was overseas. It was in my country at that time. So yeah.
So what we can deduce from that is that there's probably another reason, and they were either afraid to tell you, they were not honest enough, they didn't want to reveal, they didn't want any confrontation perhaps, and sometimes they say the no local experience is the issue. Now, if you're not getting an interview, then perhaps a no local experience can be a factor.
Yeah.
But certainly not after the interview when they knew that already. So, yeah, that's an interesting one. Okay, let's just jump back a bit. Amjad's just jumped in and said, tell us a little bit about yourself, what you did in Indonesia and what sort of work you tried to find here and the changes you've made perhaps and so on. So you mentioned risk management initially, is that right?
Yeah, sure. That was my experience when I was working in Indonesia for, I think, if you're going back from 2016 backwards for 3 years, it was risk management. But before that, I was working in aviation company as an operations staff on the ground field at the airport. But before that, my degree, both of them that I did, it wasn't even actually, related to anything that I did as an employee at that time, because my degree was in international relations. It was in political science studies, so it's got nothing to do whatsoever with the work that I did. And yeah, but it was actually quite amazing. So every time I came across something, I just sort of like took it as a challenges. Like, and yeah, when I started to work in Indonesia, and I left everything behind in terms of my degree, that I didn't do anything political science studies work at that time. But I suppose you can actually start. But yeah, it's at the end of the day, it's gonna be beneficial.
Okay.
And I thought it was going to be useful, all those experience when I came here.
Right. So you have what we call a long-term plan and probably a medium-term plan as well, I guess. You want to get back to the foundation of your international studies and explore that as a work option. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
But you're not currently doing that. You've taken a bit of a sideways step. So just tell us a little bit about what you're doing at the moment and the work you did find.
At the moment, the current work that I'm doing now.
Yep.
Okay, so starting in May, I was working as a admin officer. I was dealing quite lots of admin work in education sector in one of the institute here in Melbourne.
Yep.
And after that, they asked me to move to another department, but it wasn't actually asked because I had to apply for the job. But they thought that because I was actually working within that institute already. So they're sort of like, prioritizing me to go to that department and work with that department. So,
Okay.
and it's a bit more than the admin work, because now I'm relating, engaged with the program instead of just doing the admin work.
Right, okay. And I understand that you're actually offered 2 separate roles, is that right?
Yeah, that is right. And it was actually the best after a few months getting rejected all the time. Yeah, but by the time comes, you actually get offered 2 positions, which I was actually have to thinking hard which one that I'm going to choose.
Yeah, okay, good. Alan's asked a question. How did you get the job? Was it through networking or directly applying or through recruiters?
It was through networking, I have to say, and that was the missing piece that I lost, because I was actually applying jobs for myself through SEEKs. I went to external agencies as well, and to recruitment agencies, and asking what would be the best thing for me to do, and what would be the better thing for me to do to keep applying for jobs, but in the right way, in accordance to the Australian workplace, the expectation or what you expect. If you look at the resume and cover letter and all the jobs that I applied at that time, they asked me to do selection criteria, which is a really horrible piece of documents, and I really hate to write them, but I just have to do it. And yeah, it was through networking, which I didn't have at that time, and somebody was going on a leave, and this person, knowing that person, and offered me that job if I could start available, for instance, just 2 days a week, and I just said yes. Why wouldn't I do 2 days a week? Even though just asking me to half day a week, I would have done it. As long as you can start your foot on the door and you can start somewhere, that's fine.
Yeah, sure. Now, even though you had established some contacts, you did have to, as you say, submit a very detailed application, including addressing a key selection criteria. Now, for anybody out there who's applying for government jobs, university, hospital, NGO roles, you may need to complete one of these documents. So how did you go about doing that? Because they're quite difficult to draft.
Oh, it is definitely difficult. And every single job that I applied at that time, with the selection criteria, it has to be different. So you can't write the same thing over and over again, because you have to tailor them in accordance with the job descriptions that you're applying. And yeah, because my aim at that time, I just didn't want to apply for any kind of jobs, as long as, like for instance, retail jobs or, manufacturing jobs, because I don't quite want that. And yeah, when I sort of like drafted those documents, it took me quite a long time, like about 2 to 3 days, just to finish one whole selection criteria, because you've got about 7 to 8 questions to be answered based on your experience. And that's the thing, going back to the experience thing, if you didn't have the local knowledge, a local experience of working in Melbourne or in Australia, how could you sort of like explain all those questions and answer them in a very different way? So that was the challenge at that time.
Yeah, and for university education roles, it's really important that you have some understanding of the internal systems of that organisation as well. And you can find a lot of that out from the internet and doing some networking and contacting the right people, because you're probably going to be competing against people who've worked in that domain before, used the same databases, the same student learner management systems, all of these sorts of things. So that takes a little bit of extra effort. And as you said, those key selection criteria documents take a long time to prepare. So I'm just picking up on that and asked a question from pre-submitted questions yesterday. How did you build your network and start meeting with people from, within your field?
I started to do lots of volunteering last year. So I went to lots of job fairs as well, like meeting with people. Every time I meet with potential employees at that time, I sort of like explain myself, like, I came from Indonesia and I'm in Australia, I'm staying here. I just started to rebuild my life. So because you're leaving everything back in your country and you started to come here and you're going back to square one. And yeah, the more you talk to people, I thought at that time it was the better way to do it, because you just came here, you didn't know anyone. And that's how I network at that time through volunteerings, to do lots of job fairs, attending them, lots of seminars, and we've got lots of free seminars here with the universities in Melbourne. Lots of them you can attend without even paying for them, so which is really good.
Yeah, sure. So not every networking, so to speak, meeting is going to lead to a job. So you have to do a lot of it. Yeah.
Yeah, that is right.
Great. Okay. Indica has just asked a question. What would be your advice for, let's say, an IT professional who has been in Melbourne for about 6 months working within a different field? He wants to get back into his field, but into a new area, which is business analysis. So BA roles are very, very popular. There are many advertised and lots of positions available, but everybody wants lots of experience. What do you suggest for somebody who wants to take a sideways step like that?
I think it's better for you because what most important here in Australia, especially in Melbourne as well, if you have the proper qualifications of doing the job that you're aiming for. So in the meantime that you're working at the moment, you also take short course or anything that you can do to upskill yourself in terms of the role, in terms of the job description that you're aiming for. Because if you have the proper qualifications, they could see that you have the experience of working in Australia, even though it's on a different field, but you already have that, another positive advantage, which is, you have the proper qualifications of doing, business or whatever that is. It might going to, improve your chances of getting that job that you want. Me, for instance, I'm planning to go back to uni next year to do another, course in government agencies, things like that, because that's always going to be my dream to work for the government and go back to uni, start to study again. But in the meantime, I'm still going to do the job that I'm doing now until I get that job and finish the uni and everything. So the more you upskill yourself, instead of just being stuck with the same job, which is fine if that's going to be your end goal, but to have a long-term goal is actually always going to be better.
Yeah, that's good advice. It also, if you do take up study or self-study or anything like that, it shows a commitment to a change in direction as well. It's one thing to say, I've got IT experience now, I want to be a business analyst, and just talk to people. They're going to say, well, what have you done to move along that path? And if you can show that you are partway down certification or you are exploring, methodologies and options that perhaps doing some, agile training or whatever you need for that particular shift, it shows that you're serious. Because otherwise people just think, oh, you can't find a job in your area, so you're just trying something else because you've seen lots of jobs advertised. So it gives you currency to do local certification or some sort of step in the right direction. Yeah?
Yeah, that's right. And also being serious and really keen without even pretending it matters so much here. People could see it and they really value that kind of way of you doing your work.
Yeah, and I think any interaction you have as well, so if you are drafting a cover letter, you're writing an email to somebody, you're making contact with somebody in a networking situation, you have to explain that this is what you want. Instead of saying this is what I've done, I'm thinking about it, be really assertive and positive about the direction you're heading in. Okay, Vinoy has asked, do you reckon applying directly on Seek or LinkedIn is okay? Whether that has much impact without having an internal reference. So I'm assuming you mean internal reference being somebody in the company that you're trying to apply for a job with. What do you think about that, Rifqi?
I can tell you this much. I just found out actually throughout my journey getting employment last year, almost 80% jobs that, out there, they're not advertised. And I was really shocked, all those jobs, thousands of jobs on Indeed, Seek, you could see them really, easy, they're there, but they're only 20%. And that was just shocking for me to find out that, because I could spend a day applying for 6 to 7 jobs every single day, because looking for work, it's also like, you're working, you're doing a full-time job in front of your computer, 9 to 5, or what I did was even from 6 to 6. So, yeah. I'm not saying that it's a time wasting, but if that's what you want to do, that's fine. But at least you have something else to do as well, apart from applying for jobs. Like you sort of like keep managing applying for 3 to 4 jobs, and at the same time you can do something else that, to increase your chances of getting a job at the same time, instead of just applying online. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. You have to do many different things.
Yeah.
And look, people do get jobs just by applying for them online and through Seek and so on. It's possible. But of course, you're competing against people who may have contacts in that
That's right.
company. There are lots of reasons why it's very difficult. So you've got to do the networking. You've got
Yeah.
to start making direct contact with hiring managers when there are no jobs advertised. It's important you do this in a professional and culturally appropriate way. So it's good to get some advice on, if you're going to contact somebody, how to do it. Otherwise, it could maybe just be seen as spam or as a pest, just, hassling somebody about work when there's no job advertised. So it's a good thing to do, but you've got to do it in the right way. So that's just a piece of advice there. Mian has asked, how have you overcome any gaps in your CV, if you've had any? So did you have any periods of time where you didn't do much, or it looked like, it was a problem for the reader? What did you do with any gaps you had?
So with the gaps that I had last year at that time, so I arrived in January 2016. The first interview that I got, it was almost 4 months after that, and I got employment with the ABS at that time last year for the census, but it was only for 3 months. But within those gaps, before I get the job with the ABS, I did volunteering as well, and after that, I kept doing the same thing, so I didn't stop. Because with the volunteering, you're meeting with lots of people, and it increases chances of you getting a job. So because even though that you're not getting paid, but when you put that on your resume, you could show them that you're actually doing something instead of not doing anything. And even though that it's the smallest thing in the world for you, probably not for them. That's how I saw it at that time.
Yeah, sure. Amjad has asked another question. How did you remove the bias of having foreign experience, which might or might not be relevant? So you talked about before how you thought you were just going to get a job because you had some experience in Indonesia. What did you do about this?
After I didn't hear anything for 3 months, I thought that it was useless. That's all. I thought that all those jobs that I did, all those experience that I did for almost 4 years when I was working in Indonesia, it was nothing as soon as I came here. Like, it's just sort of like, a fresh graduate from uni, and you didn't have any working experience whatsoever. And again, volunteering is one of the best things for you to do, and networking, meeting lots of people. Even though I did have a job for almost 9 months, if I count them all, but I kept myself busy, wake up in the morning, doing like a normal person. You just go to a coffee shop really in the morning and find something else that you enjoy to work. Like, you're meeting lots of people, you talk. And I can tell you this much as well. My English at that time wasn't really good. It wasn't like this. So the more I talk to people, it's also increased your language skills as well. And I found it a bit difficult for me at that time because I was in Indonesia for 4 years after I get back from Canberra, and I started to get my English back, and that's how I did it. Because if you have someone who could speak English really well, and someone like me at that time, for instance, I couldn't speak English properly, of course they're going to trust the other person, not me.
Yeah, sure. Back on the point about bias of foreign experience, there is a bit of prejudice there towards favouring people who have local experience. It's not always a problem, but sometimes it can be. I think what you need to do is to emphasise the tasks, the responsibilities, and not so much the location. So if you can focus on what you did, not where you did it, it's still pretty tough, but that's one thing you can do along those lines. Let's have a look at some other questions here. Samuel has asked, how difficult is it for IT professionals working abroad to come to Australia and get a job in the similar field? That really depends, Samuel. It depends on what you do in IT. It's very broad. If you do highly specialised work, then you might be able to find work very quickly, and even while you're overseas. But generally, you need to come here and try to find work while you're here. Most people do that. It just depends on what your skill set is there. Yeah. Parthiban has asked a question. Hi, I came to Sydney 5 months back from India. I was working as a senior manager, business consulting, working on business transformation and continuous improvement strategy consulting. I got a lot of advice that I should change my designation from senior manager to something like senior BA or senior business consultant. I'm not inclined to do that as I already have floated my CV in the market with the actual designation. So any advice there, Rifqi?
I did that time. Like when I was working in Asia, I sort of like I was working in a not in the low level, sort of like the medium to managerial level. And when I came here, that particular title, I applied for several jobs. And I didn't quite hear anything yet, so I sort of like downgraded. But I didn't apply for the same companies or for the same organization. So I didn't use my same resume to apply for the same jobs with the same companies or organizations. So I sort of like, forget about them and apply for something else.
Sure. Just that point that Parthiban has made about floating his CV in the market. Now, this means generally circulating it to recruiters. It doesn't mean that every single employer has your CV.
Yeah.
Okay, so what we have to do is to shift away from I'm going to get a job by giving it to recruiters to being more proactive and more direct with your approach by approaching companies directly.
That's right.
Only, maybe 10 or 20% of jobs are advertised through companies directly. A lot go through recruiters, depending on your field. But it's really worth spending time on those ones that are advertised directly. And you can present yourself as what you like to those people. They will not have your CV. So it's not as if the whole country has your CV. It may be a handful of recruiters. Let's step out of that circle and start approaching directly. The sooner you do that, the better anyway, because you need to not be reliant on recruiters. If you don't have local experience, they're going to have more issues than an employer will with the fact that you don't have local experience. This dilemma that project managers, senior managers have, and business analysts. So most project managers have had some BA experience. So it's a dilemma as to whether to concentrate on something on the business analyst side or to go for a managerial role. It is harder to get work as a manager for your first role in Australia. There's no doubt about that. So if you can,
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, and not take too much of a step down, but maybe one step down. Don't go for too junior a role because you'll be overqualified. But it is important to think about your options and manager, particularly the word senior. You put that on a CV and it can turn some people off. If you're not getting interviews, I would suggest you rethink your tactics there. Okay, let me have a look to see what else is relevant here. About local experience, this is from Vinoy again. Do employers consider it local experience even if it is working in a different domain or work stream? What do you think about that, Rifqi?
I suppose so. Yeah, I suppose so. Because the more experience in terms of local experience that you have here, even though it's not quite related to what you did in your country or what you're doing now, it's better not to having it at all. Because you have the culture of the Australian workforce is really different, I have to say, and it's really specific in terms of how they run their businesses and service. But actually, most of the companies and organizations that I have approached, they're doing the same thing in terms of how they conduct their work or their service.
Right.
It's just in terms of the content, in terms of what they're doing. If some companies are selling or these companies are doing the service, in terms of the outcome of what they're doing, they're different. But in terms of how they're doing it, it's the same. And for us to take part in one of those companies or organizations to be able to grasp the culture and doing the same thing, it's good.
Yeah, good advice. I think also having a chance to speak to your prospective employers is important, because just on a CV, if you put down your current role in Australia and it's sort of a sidestep from what you actually want to do, it's very hard to explain in a CV why you're doing that job. But if you can actually get to talk to people, even with emails or cover letters, to explain your situation, then people are more likely to understand, why you're not actually working in the area that you want to be working in at the moment. Okay, Tarek has asked a question about, have you tried applying for a job from overseas? Do you think there is a chance of securing an offer before landing down under? What's your opinion on that?
Might be, you don't close the opportunity, but it's gonna be a lot harder than you're already in the country. That I have to say, because before I came to Australia, I did apply for some jobs in Singapore or in Malaysia, because those are the countries that are closest to me. And I did get an interview, but as soon as they asked me my whereabouts and I explained to them I'm still here, and that's just sort of like, it's sort of like a turn up for them, because it's better if you're already in the country. But I'm not going to say no, but who knows?
Yeah, sure. Just to let you know my experience with that. So after I've been doing this for about 12 years, the people who get work while they're still offshore fit into one of two categories. One, they are either very, very senior and they have very high-powered jobs in multinational companies. So they might be a CFO or a CEO for a large telco organization in South Africa or in Singapore or Hong Kong, or in a bank.
Yeah.
Okay, very, very high level position. The second is people who have highly specific technical IT skills. Okay, so at the moment, everybody's asking for DevOps experience in the IT field. Anybody who has this is highly sought after. So there are people who can get work from overseas simply through a recruiter. It's possible. Unfortunately, most people don't fit into that category of having something that is in such demand. Right. There's nobody in the country who can do it.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
So most people have jobs that maybe hundreds of other people can do. So in that situation, really, you're going to have to come to Australia to actually have a chance. But before you leave, there's a lot you can do in preparations to minimize your period of unemployment when you arrive. So all of the documentation, your resume, your networking, all of that can be done while you're offshore. All right. So if anybody wants any advice on how to do this, please contact me. OBP Australia runs services for people who are anywhere in the world. Many OBP Australia clients are actually in their country of origin and haven't left yet, but they're doing the preparation because when they get here, they want to hit the ground running and not spend the first month doing their CV and trying to find people.
Yeah.
Okay. This is an interesting one. No name here, but it's been a year since I last joined one of your webinars. Okay, welcome back. The speaker then was a networking engineer. I arrived 8 months ago on a PR visa and got a survival job 10 days after, and then as a warehouse casual worker for 6 months. So it's still not in the profession. Finally got a job in my respective profession last month. Congratulations.
Well done.
In regional Victoria. Fantastic.
Oh.
My question for Rifqi, have you ever considered working in regional areas of Victoria or New South Wales or Queensland or anywhere?
Mate, I'm planning to move to Canberra the next 3 years. I can tell you that. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not going to limit my options in terms of where I'm going to get a job. Anywhere in Australia should be fine.
And regional Victoria is a great choice, I think, or New South Wales or ACT, Queensland, South Australia, anywhere regional. Yes, there are fewer jobs, okay, but there's also less competition.
And not many people want to go there. That's the thing.
That's right. Many engineers that I've met have taken their first job in regional areas and have ended up living there and enjoying life there. But if you like a big city, you can always come back. I mean, you could spend, a couple of years, 2 or 3 years in Ballarat, Bendigo,
That's
Armidale,
right.
Toowoomba, Cairns, wherever, and then come back to a big city once you've established yourself in a job. So that's definitely possible, and a great suggestion for whoever that was. I don't have the name of that person. Okay, let's see if we've got anybody else who's got any similar types of questions coming up here. If you have a question, please post it, and I'll throw it to Rifqi. Okay, let's just move on, and please send any more questions coming through. So how many interviews did you have, Rifqi, before you landed a job?
So far, I think it was about 20 to 25 interviews until I get a proper job that I'm doing now.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Of those ones, how many would you have received feedback on?
About 4 to 5, not many.
Right. Okay. And
because since months went by, I applied for sort of survival jobs as well, like retail, and I got interviews with Coles or Woolworths, things like that. And also I applied for some jobs with IKEA, and yeah, it's sort of like those things that I really wanted to do, but at the end of the day, you just have to start somewhere. That's what I thought.
Yep. Okay. So of those 4 to 5 that you received feedback on, what sort of things did they tell you about why you were not successful?
Mostly because I didn't have the local experience and the proper knowledge of doing it. Most of the times, that's what they're telling me.
Okay.
So it got myself thinking, like, what sort of local experience that I have to have in terms of getting a job straight away. I didn't quite get it at that time until I started to network with OBP Australia.
Right. Okay. So back to that point when you first came to see me, what was it that you found useful, perhaps that you weren't getting before you came to OBP Australia?
It was the networking part. Mainly, it was the networking part. How do you approach employers, and also how do you communicate doing social media like LinkedIn, and also how to actually tailor my resume, because I thought at that time my resume was the greatest.
Right.
In terms of the layout, in terms of the how do you manage to put your experience first or your education first, things like that. Things like that actually matters, and those things help me to actually fit myself better within the Australian workforce and get my chances higher to get a job here.
Yep. Okay, great. Okay. Vinoy has asked a question. How long of local experience is considered good enough?
It's a really tricky question. It's relative, I have to say.
Yep. Would you like to explain further?
I have to say. I think how long in terms of, do you want to stick with the job or you want to move on with some other jobs? So it depends. If you want to stick with the job, like the job that I'm doing now, I'm planning not to stay here for long, about 2 to 3 years maximum. And after that, I'm going to go to my, the really job that I really wanted to do, which is working for the government. That's why I'm going to go back to uni and start to upskill myself and increase my knowledge while I'm doing the work with the local experience here at this institute.
Right. Okay. I'm not exactly sure what Vinoy is asking there. So, how long of a local experience is considered good enough? I think maybe what he's saying is that how long do you have to work in Australia before you can leverage this as solid local experience for your next job? Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Because when I was at uni, I actually worked, Harry, but it wasn't like professional jobs. It was I was working, in the evening in a cafe, working in a restaurant, things like that. In the morning, I went to study at uni, but it wasn't actually quite relevant. As soon as you graduated and you started to look with the professional levels, with the jobs that you're currently looking, it's not relevant, and that sort of like the employers sort of like thinking it's not quite what they're looking for, because unless you want to work in hospitality again, that might be relevant.
Yeah, that's really important. So any local experience is not necessarily what you're looking for. It's relevant local experience. And as soon as you get that relevant local experience and it goes on your resume, all of a sudden, if you keep applying for jobs, you'll start to get more interviews. Okay, purely because you have a local employer in your field.
Yeah.
So one of the things I often tell students, my clients, is that they will put their local survival job experience on the front page. Now, this is a concern because if you're an engineer and the first thing that appears is customer service 7-Eleven or Uber driver, it's a real distraction for the reader. So even though it's helpful for you to get money, it's helpful for your communication skills, meeting people, socializing, all those sorts of things, it's not really progressing you down the your career path. So just local experience for the sake of getting it is not necessarily that useful. Okay, Dami has asked, I'm a quality assurance engineer back in my country. Once I moved here, I did not get the chance to work in the industry. Still, I'm trying, but started applying for junior roles due to the gap. Am I doing the right thing? Yeah, good question, Dami.
Yep, I suppose you are doing the right thing because that's what I did. I downgraded myself. I didn't, aim the work or the position that I was working when I was in Indonesia. No, I definitely downgraded myself and sort of like, going from the lower level. And if you do have the proper knowledge and experience, even though that you're working in your country and you started at the lower level that what you had at that time, it's actually better. It increases the chance for you to get that job. And me, started my role as an admin job because in every organization you do need an admin, and that's actually my way of thinking. Like, if you can get a job in admin and you can sort of like work your way up if you're already in the organization. So
right, okay. So another thing that I would be another piece of information I would need Dami to advise there is, if you're a QA engineer and you haven't secured work in that area, are you getting interviews? Are you not getting any response at all? Is it a domain issue? Are you moving outside of your domain? Whether you're in, fast-moving consumer goods manufacturing, or is it a different type of QA? What is it you're trying to do? How close are you getting? There may be other reasons. It may not be because you are trying to apply for senior jobs. It could be something else wrong with your approach. So before you move into looking for junior roles only, I would like to do sort of an assessment of what is happening so far. One of the concerns that I have is if you've held very senior positions and you go too low, too junior, then you become overqualified. And if you have a lot of experience, you're likely to be older in age, and they may be looking for somebody in their mid to late 20s at a junior role. So it's not always as simple as downgrading. So there are many factors to consider there, and it's probably worth getting some advice on what you should do. Okay, let's have a look. We've probably got another 5 minutes and then we'll wind it up. Vinoy has said, is it a good idea to hire a professional to redo the CV or cover letter?
Well, that's basically what I did with OBP. It's not actually hire professionals to redo, but you actually do it by yourself. But you get the advice of how to do it better than you actually doing it when you were just by yourself. So you get the proper professional advice with the OBP. That's what I had at that time. And how you can actually tailor those things on your resume, on your cover letter, on your selection criteria as well, because everything has got to be different. And you've got actually to think not to use the same thing twice for the jobs that you're applying. And I found it really hard. And when I was engaging with the OBP Australia, it helped me so much to find many ways in terms of, using your words or using your sentences when you apply for jobs.
Yeah, I think that's a critical point you've mentioned there. It's not enough just to get somebody to write your CV. or write your
Yeah.
cover letter. So it's not a static document. And as Rifqi said, you need to change it all the time. So you have to own those documents. You have to be able to change them for given jobs. So what you need is somebody who can take you through that process. Yes, they can change it initially and give you a model, give you something to work with as a starting point, then show you how to use that when you're applying for applications. Simply giving you a resume to use is very, very limited. So I wouldn't be forking out $500 to somebody who's going to write your CV for you. It's really not worth the money. You need more than that. You need somebody who's going to show you how to own your documents, how to make the changes yourself. Yeah. But
And
also,
do you mind if I add, Terry?
yeah, sure.
I think the guidance is more important for you to, go through the step by step of how to properly do your resume, cover letter, and selection criteria. Because when you get the interview, you have to be able to answer those questions because of the resume that you wrote. It was by you, so you couldn't ask that person who wrote your resume to explain those things to you. So you just have to do it by yourself with the proper guidance and advice by professionals like OPP.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, that's good advice. Okay. We have Geeta who's got a visa type question here. I have been trying for a job since April with 9+ years experience of total IT experience. Currently I'm on a 457 visa. My PR is expected by December the 1st, first week in December. Is it a waste of time trying for jobs till then? Please advise. Did you always have a PR, Rifqi, or were you on some other sort of visa initially?
I'm still on my partner visa
Yep.
because I'm married to an Australian. That's the reason why I'm here. My wife couldn't see herself living in Indonesia, so that's why I came here. She asked me to come here. And yeah, I think no, it's not actually wasting time. I mean, yeah, like I said before, the more you do something, the better than you just waiting for nothing. So yeah, to keep engaging, to look for informations, to talk to people, networking, do whatever that you can do instead of just waiting. Yeah, it's always better.
Yeah, and look, December's not very far away anyway. So
Yeah, it's
if you
only three
start,
months away. Yeah.
yeah, getting into the application process now and networking and so on, it's really worthwhile doing it before December. Unless you're applying online where they have a drop-down menu that says what is your visa category, if you're just applying for jobs where you're uploading your CV and cover letter, they don't need to know your visa status anyway until you actually get an interview or a call back. So at that point, it's always easier to explain your situation than try to put it on paper. If you just write, I'm a temporary resident on your visa, on your resume, you're going to come into problems with that. So it's always better to discuss this with people who are reading your documents. Okay, let's have maybe one more question and we'll finish off. So we'll finish off with Indica, who is asking, I have generic experience in IT project management and not specialized in a specific area such as SAP. I feel that it is the greatest challenge I am facing when trying to get back into my field. Any advice to overcome such a situation? Are you familiar with any
I
of this,
suppose
Rifqi?
yeah, with the software, yeah. I came across that once when I was working in Indonesia, but I didn't quite actually use it. I didn't even know how to use it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
But I
yeah,
suppose in regards to how to actually use it and get yourself around, the SAP software, I think it's really important if you want to go back to, what you were doing at that time.
yeah. Often this happens when people have not worked in a large organization. So SAP, ERP systems. So these are platforms that integrate the whole business, all the different arms of the business. And if you haven't had experience with an ERP, particularly SAP, then employers often won't consider you. What you need to do is to try to get into conversations with people and to explain to them, yes, I don't have SAP experience, but what I have done is I've worked in other environments that are quite similar, and it's probably worth you trying to find out as much as you can about SAP, at least so you have the vocabulary to discuss it. You don't want to just say, no, I haven't. You need to be able to say, well, I understand what SAP involves. I understand this. I have this. And you can do a lot of learning yourself these days with online tutorials and talking to the right people about what it is about SAP that people want, what experience specifically. So yeah, it's tough. Some people even say you must have at least 5 years experience SAP. So that's going to be really difficult to convince someone of that. Okay, last one from Geetha. This is my last question. I am upskilling myself until I get my PR. Would it not be considered 10 months gap till December? So
upskilling yourself, like doing like studying or training.
I guess so, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's always a good idea to do the upskilling, self-study. So she's saying she's doing self-study. So
Okay.
yeah. I know in the IT field, a lot of people, there is a lot you can learn online now as well, and you're expected to. You actually can't go to university and get some courses. You've just got to be completely proactive and get this experience online. So, yeah, I think self-study is becoming more and more valued if you can explain it. So the bottom line is, are you able to articulate what you have learnt? It's not enough to say, I did a course, okay?
Yeah.
People don't want to know that. They want to know what you know about the subject area, what functionality you're familiar with within a software package, for example, what you can do with that tool, all right?
Yeah.
So imagine if you're going to be talking to a professional peer, somebody you work with, somebody from the same background as you. They don't say to you, have you used this software? They'll say, tell me what you've used this software for. So they'll get you to explain in detail, and after 30 seconds, a minute, they will understand the depth of knowledge you have on the subject matter. It doesn't take it very long for one engineer to understand another engineer, one programmer to understand another one, to work out what level you're at. So you have to be able to talk about what you've done, not merely say, I've done self-study or I've done a course online. Yep.
Yeah, that's right. It's sort of like operating a computer. You have to know the flows and step by step of how to actually use it.
That's right. And people, you don't get a chance to show somebody, so it's your ability to explain that, to articulate that, that's going to convince somebody you can do the job.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we're coming to the end of this session. So thank you everybody for joining us, and a big special thanks to Rifqi. Well done, Rifqi.
You're welcome, David. Thank you so much. My pleasure.
And good luck in your future endeavours and your study and working at the same time, which will be a bit of a challenge, but I'm sure you're highly motivated and you will succeed in whatever you choose to do. So thanks, Rifqi, and have a good evening, and everybody sleep well. Next week...
Thank you.
No worries. Next week we have another guest, so stay tuned. Those of you who have... attended this evening will also get an invitation to next week. So for the next 3 weeks, on Thursdays at 8 p.m, there'll be a webinar, Meet Success. So people, ex-OBP Australia clients or people who I've worked with who have succeeded in finding work in their profession will be joining us to have a chat about their experience. So good night, everybody, and sleep well. And thanks again, Rifqi. Take care.